After a surprisingly strong showing against Delaware, will Ryan Staub be the one to unlock the Colorado Buffaloes offense? What does this potential changing of the guard at quarterback mean for Kaidon Salter and Julian Lewis? And defensively, are the Buffs ready to begin their slate of Big 12 play? All things to come on today's rundown, but we have to begin with a special shout out to our friends at Denver Regenerative Medicine. If weight loss has been a struggle, it's time for something real, guys. At Denver Regenerative Medicine, they use full-strength GLP-1 medications with doctor oversight. Start today with a free consultation. Real results for under $300 a month. Book now at denverregen.com. And we welcome in friend of the show, kind of the underboss at DenverSports.com, who pulls a lot of strings behind the scenes, and a Colorado Buffaloes alum, Trent Finnegan. Trent, how are you, man?
I'm doing good. Appreciate you having me. Excited to talk some Buffs with you, man.
I am too, because, boy, I'll tell you what, I think I saw that game against Delaware going a handful of different ways, but what actually transpired, I do not think was on my personal 2025 bingo card, and that is the third-string quarterback, not Julian Lewis, the five-star heralded prospect who reclassified to get to the point where he is, not Kaidon Salter, the fifth-year transfer who was the starter to begin the season, but third stringer and holdover from the previous coaching regime, Ryan Staub, who comes in and, frankly, transforms the efficiency of the offense in a way that we just hadn't seen up to this point.
I mean, that offense was lethargic. It was not moving whatsoever. Kaidon Salter led a good drive to start the game. He was 6 for 6 and had a rushing touchdown that opening drive.
Correct.
But after that, it started to slow down a little bit, and then Lewis came in, and Lewis, he wasn't able to really get things going. He didn't have good blocking. The run game fell off those two drives. And then Ryan Staub walks in, and you got 45 seconds to go get some points, and he almost throws 2 picks to start. That was, if those balls get caught by Delaware, we might be having a whole different conversation. But he catches a break on those, finds Joseph Williams deep down the field, and the rest is history. I mean, we have a full-blown quarterback battle now. And I think the big thing with Staub is you saw his chemistry with Pat Shurmur really show in that win. You know, Lewis and Salter, they haven't worked with Shurmur as much as Ryan Staub has over the last 3 years. You see Staub's a little more comfortable with the playbook. He was hot routing Sincere Brown on those 2 go balls, something that Salter and Lewis weren't doing. He just looked a lot more comfortable in that signal calling role for the Buffs. And I think that they're going to have to stick with him on Friday. It just was too good to go away from.
Well, we did get news from Pete Thamel earlier today that the expectation is that Ryan Staub will be the starter against Houston on Friday. Now, Coach Prime has tried to walk that back a little bit, and it feels like maybe somebody spoiled the secret and the surprise, because that's been kind of the theme with Coach Prime at the podium this season is, I know, but you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to know until I want you to know. And that's kind of the nature of college football and the coaching dynamic with the big egos and personalities that are in place there. But when you look at the quarterback breakdown over the course of that entire game, and statistically how each one shook out, it's pretty clear who was in the most command of the offense. You could look at Kaidon Salter, who was 13 of 16. You mentioned being 6 for 6 on the opening drive for 102 yards and that 1 rushing touchdown. Julian Lewis had a small sample size where it did look disjointed. He didn't have the best blocking. The play calling probably wasn't great. But all in all, Trent, it didn't look like he was fully ready for that moment either. Because Ryan Staub comes in right after that and is 8 for 11 for almost 160 yards and a couple of touchdowns in some pretty clutch situations. They all played the same Delaware defense, right?
Yes,
so there is a certain element of like each guy had to play the same situations and the same defensive fronts. And Ryan Staub clearly just made the most of it. It's not to say that Kaidon Salter didn't maybe get a little bit of a raw deal, getting moved away from and then thrown back in where it was kind of hard to watch to a certain point when you restart the quarterback rotation. But you alluded to it. I agree with it. And Pete Thamel is at least reporting initially that that's going to be the case. I don't see one logical reason, given what we've seen from Kaidon Salter in the first game and a half and what we saw from Staub in that portion of the game where he was able to come in, why you wouldn't move forward with this guy if your ultimate goal is to win as many games in the Big 12 as you can.
Exactly. And it seemed like Staub had this offense set up to win now. He played better than Salter and Lewis did. And the thing that I really noticed is how the team rallied around him.
Bingo.
It was nothing to do, or I mean, of course it was with how he had to throw and whatnot, but on the sidelines afterwards, everyone's energized. There's juice on that sidelines. Everyone's rallying around him. And he just brought a life that you hadn't seen in that first 5 quarters of the season, 5.5 quarters of the season. So, and as a player, it's so hard to get in a rhythm when you're just running this musical chair of quarterbacks around and around and around. And Dion said today, he's like, I'm tired of doing this musical chair. He's like, I hope to have one quarterback by Friday. We'll see if he actually holds up to that. But I think for the benefit of the players, especially having the rhythm and the guy that energized them, I think that Staub is the right choice. And, maybe he goes out against Houston and he lays an egg and then you reassess it. But with how he played on Saturday, I think he's earned the right to be the man out there first on Friday night.
The team buy-in aspect is huge because it came out during some in-game video where Coach Prime's on the sideline and he points to Ryan Staub and he says, look at it. And he points at Jordan Seaton and the other. Hey, they believe in you. We believe in you. And I don't know, especially when it resonated with the players where he's getting a game ball after the game and everyone's hyping him up. And it really did feel like more so, at least from our observational window that we have. And you're covering the games in Boulder as closely as anybody and all of us watching it on the broadcast as well. It looked like that energized and got a spark out of the offense in particular, more so than we had seen from Kaidon Salter or the limited sample size with Julian Lewis up to that point. And Coach Prime also, was complimentary of Staub after the game when he mentioned throwing up the Shador, right? We gotta throw up the Shador, who he spent time with as a backup, last season. And then he went so far as to give the I Have a Dream speech. And again, all of that is silly. And it points to, it's a joke, but in some ways it's not, because that was the presence and the poise of a guy who was ready for that moment.
Exactly.
He was not flustered by getting thrown in as a third quarterback with a couple of series, one of which was less than a minute left in the game. He was making big plays and was ready to celebrate it. And in the post-game interview, he really came across humble but confident, in my opinion.
Yeah, and he was talking about in the post-game, we have more work to do. It's all about the team. This is just one step. I'm happy for my guys. So I was really impressed with the poise that he showed throughout that game. And again, like we keep saying, it's just something that we haven't seen from Salter. Lewis got limited reps, and obviously Lewis is a younger guy, so we're not sure how much of that leadership aspect he's really channeled yet. But it was just, and two, the student section's chanting his name. If I told you before the game that the student section was going to be chanting Ryan Staub in the third quarter, I mean, everybody would have been like,
yeah, that's crazy.
And that's the reality. It's just, he got everyone he became the center of the Colorado football world. Everyone kind of rallied around him, and it was awesome to watch. And he finally got his moment. And another thing, he could have transferred. He talked about that post game.
Yeah.
Every backup quarterback these days, you feel like is in the portal. And he stuck it out behind Shador for 2 years. And then they bring in Lewis, they bring in Salter. Easy opportunity to go transfer. And no, he sticks with it. He loves Shermer. He loves the process, and he gets rewarded for it.
Trent, you think about the regime that he came in under, being recruited by Carl Durrell, and the nightmare, the disastrous midseason firing. Mike Sanford, our guy, takes over. And he has the opportunity when Coach Prime comes in, whose first message to the team, by the way, is some of y'all better ready to hit the portal because I'm bringing my own luggage, and it's Louis. Mm-hmm. And at the quarterback position, especially where there's so few amount of real starting opportunities at the Power 4 level, for him to stick it out and see it through, and then to have it manifest and materialize in that moment is pretty special. And it, again, projects the question forward. Assuming that Pete Thamel and others who are now corroborating it are correct, and Ryan Staub starts against Houston, how much, if at all, do you think we will see any implementation of Kaidon Salter or Julian Lewis with specialty packages and the potential for this carousel to keep moving at least a little bit into week 3?
So I don't think that you're going to see any Lewis. This is, since it's a conference game, it's way too important to throw him back into the fire. Maybe that Wyoming game, you could see him a little more.
Which is the next week.
The next week is Wyoming. This week, again, at Houston, they have shifted from like 3.5 point underdogs, I think, all the way up to 6.5 point underdogs now. So this is a game. Houston is a formidable opponent. So I think you're going to see a lot of Staub, no Lewis. But Salter, goal line running packages, you've got to keep that in. You get that extra blocker in the running back when you run Salter off the edge. So I think that he'll get put in maybe some goal line, maybe some 3rd and short, 4th and short. But I think most of the way it's going to be Staub with a little sprinkle of Salter when you need him.
I have been very vocal that I am not a fan of the multi-quarterback approach and using the specialized packages. I know here locally with Sean Payton, he was infamous or famous, depending on how you look at it, for taking a Hall of Famer and Drew Brees off the field to bring in a utility knife like Taysom Hill, who has created a niche and a role within the NFL that is uniquely his.
Yes.
The Falcons tried to replicate it with Marcus Mariota and Kirk Cousins, and we've seen it at times in the past. I'm not a huge fan of it because I just think with how much pressure, specifically in college football, because every game's important in the NFL too, but with the way that one loss can completely, especially a conference loss, can completely derail the trajectory of a program for CU specifically, that I don't think has a huge margin for error, frankly, even in a conference that maybe isn't super top heavy with elite level teams. It just makes me nervous, and I default to saying, if you think that you've got a guy that gives you the best chance to win, don't find reasons to take him off the field. We will see how that pans out against Houston. And speaking of Houston, you pointed out the way that the line has stretched to basically becoming a touchdown underdog heading into this Friday. You can say what you want about their competition. They've played Stephen F. Austin and Rice, so not exactly top-tier elite-level competition. But defensively, they look like a couple of dogs. They've allowed 9 points all season in the run game, which I have some questions, and I'm sure that you have some thoughts about the Buffs' potential run defense abilities with Robert Livingston. But their running back, Dean Connors, averaging about 90 to 100 yards a game at 6.5 yards a clip. This is going to be a test that I think is going to set the tone for the Buffs in terms of starting Big 12 play, regardless of the fact that they get a Wyoming dip before they get back into conference play. I think this is a massively important game if this Buffs team is going to materialize what many people set for the expectation for them, which is 8 or 9 wins and competing for a conference potentially.
Yeah, and first off, road game, you're at a disadvantage. Friday night game, short week, you're at another disadvantage. So that's already 2 things against the Buffs right there. And you said Dean Connors a dog. 6.5 yards a carry. He had over 130 yards against Rice last week. He will get the ball a lot on Friday night. And the Buffs, they still haven't really figured out their linebacker room. They started with Reggie Hughes and Martavius French. And then in week 2, they pulled Hughes out. They went to Jeremiah Brown, who's been around this program for a long time. And he had a good game, but it kind of goes back to the same thing that we were just talking about with the quarterbacks. If you're shuffling your linebacker role, which is the captain of your defense, they're the one making all the play calls and stuff, that hurts the chemistry of your defense if they have a new leader calling the signals every single play. So I think the way last week looked is that they want to stick with French and Brown at the linebacker spot, but Hughes still leads the team in tackles because he had such a great game against Georgia Tech. So CU's got to get that linebacker room figured out. And don't forget about Sean Myers either, the North Alabama transfer as well. But those are kind of the 3, Hughes, French, and Brown, 3 top guys. But they're going to need to bring their lunch pail to work on Friday because a lot of people kind of wrote Houston off early in the season. Connors is a good back, and then they have a really good tight end as well. Excuse me, I forgot his name. Tanner Koisel. 13 catches, 115 yards, and a touchdown. And then Connor Wegman, the Texas A&M transfer, he's played a lot of football. I know it wasn't great at Texas A&M, but he's played a lot of high-stakes football. So this Houston team is good, and this Buffs defense is going to have their work cut out for them on Friday.
Well, the last time we saw the Colorado Buffaloes have a true test of sorts, it was literally their week 1 game against Georgia Tech. And if they weren't forced to stop by the officials, Haynes King would still be running for touchdowns at Folsom Field.
Yeah.
So where's your level of confidence, given the shifting that you mentioned there in the linebacker room and with their defensive front rotations? Where is your current level of confidence in Robert Livingston and the Buffs defense, specifically to defend against the run, where in their last big test, especially from Haynes King, they seemed to fail?
I'd say on a scale of 10, I'm a 6 out of 10 on the confidence scale. And you saw CU went back to a lot of cover 1, cover 0 looks on Saturday, which allowed them to stop the run. Delaware only had 2.8 yards per carry. Again, Houston isn't going to roll the Delaware offensive line. They got Dean Connors. They got a good offensive line. So I think that if CU can stay in that cover 1 look, they'll be fine defending the run. But they got kind of diced up in some of those man coverage looks against Delaware. Preston Hodge did not play a great game in the nickel. He got beat on quite a few slants inside. So the key to success is for CU's defense is the corners holding their own in one-on-one coverage. And they did all right against an inferior opponent and an inferior quarterback last week, but they're going to have their work cut out for them. If the corners can't hold up and CU then has to go maybe into a cover 3 look, into a zone, take some guys out of the box, then Houston's going to be able to run the ball all night on them. So I think it's going to start with how the corners are going to hold up one-on-one in coverage, and that's going to be the key for Friday's game.
Do you think when you look at this Buffalo's team from a zoomed out perspective, from a macro perspective, with the revolving door that we've kind of seen at quarterback, the fact that we had a 2-man quarterback competition between Kaidon Salter and Julian Lewis that appears to be won by the third string guy that we weren't even mentioning after a handful of drives against Delaware in week 2 of the regular season, does it kind of feel to you like the Buffaloes from an evaluation standpoint and a roster manipulation standpoint are a little bit behind the 8 ball? Because Pat Shurmur, after the game, made a comment that kind of made me turn my head just a little bit. And Pat Shurmur's a guy that has NFL and collegiate level experience. But when it comes to evaluating the roster, he said, we're crossing some bridges to find out who our best guys are still. In the NFL, we had 3 preseason games. This, meaning the Delaware game, would be preseason game number 2. And I hear that statement and I'm like, what do you mean week 2 of your college football season is preseason week number 2? So Houston's preseason week number 3, where we don't, you know what I mean? We play the scrubs and we really just evaluate the depth. It just feels like the wrong mentality for a team that had one of the later spring games and kind of truncated preseasons that I remember seeing in recent memory, and has already been waffling and wishy-washy at the quarterback position. Like I said, we have a third string quarterback that seems to have won a battle he wasn't even labeled in. No. He wasn't even on the fight card, and he seems to have won the fight. And now we're talking about rotations that you mentioned on the defensive end, where they keep swapping things in and out. And it just kind of feels like overall there's a very disjointed nature to all this that makes me uneasy as we're on the doorstep of Big 12 play.
I mean, you said it perfectly. Disjointed nature is how to describe it. And another thing is they treated Saturday like a scrimmage, and another group they kept switching up was the wide receivers. I mean, second quarter, it's a 2-score game, and they were just playing with their food, and it went down to 3 points because they're throwing out Quanell Farrakhan, they're throwing out Terrell Timmons, they're throwing out Quentin Gibson at wide receiver. There's nothing against those guys, but those are the backups. And I don't know why nobody really gave a great answer as to why they were playing around with that, besides, I guess, that they're treating it like a preseason game. But if you're any other team watching the film, you're looking at this team like they just keep throwing things at the wall and hoping it sticks. And then that goes back to Georgia Tech head coach Brent Key. After they beat CU, he said, yeah, it seemed like they were something along the lines of, I don't have the exact quote, something along the lines of, they were throwing everything at the wall. And as a coach, when you see other teams rotating stuff, trying different plays, that's how you know you've beat them mentally. And it just seems like CU did that again on Saturday. And if they're going to do that again on Friday, like you said, is Houston our week 3 preseason game? Are we going to treat a conference game as a preseason game? If that's the case, I mean, so many red flags go off right there. And I just don't understand why they can't get any sense of stability on any unit. They keep rotating guys around, and I get it. Depth is good. And, you know, teams rotate defensive lines, defensive ends. But when you're rotating quarterbacks and linebackers, your captains of each side of the ball, your signal callers of each side of the ball, it's just puzzling. And I don't know how that's going to fare for them when you get to week 5, week 6, week 7, and these other teams, they all have great chemistry on both sides of the ball, and CU's still working to build that chemistry up.
Yep, and that's going to be the case if they continue to. That will bleed over into this week. Even if they insert Ryan Staub, which I think we both agree is the right move for that offense as a whole, because one, he seems to have the most command of Pat Shurmur's offense, and that was a big holdback with Kaidon Salter and it's to some degree, it's not all his fault to say that Pat Shurmur's offense just frankly isn't designed for an athlete like Kaidon Salter. And Julian Lewis, who from an arm talent perspective offers a lot more, is still 17 years old for at least another week or two, if I'm not mistaken, and probably just isn't ready for that limelight quite yet, which points toward Ryan Staub. And again, if the goal for this season for the Colorado Buffaloes, which I think I've been in a minority of as someone who has tried to push the gas pedal down on this to say, hey, yes, what Coach Prime has done from an eyeball standpoint, from a revenue generation standpoint, from an admissions standpoint, and to revive CU from a 1-11 program voted basically universally the worst in the Power Five at that time, if not tied for it, is all great. And you can't take it away from him. But I stop when people start to take that extra step and say, if he doesn't accomplish one more thing from here on out, it's still a massive success. Because you got a top 5 highest paid coach, I believe, definitely top 10 paid coach in college football. You are the self-proclaimed transfer portal king in an NIL and transfer portal era of college football where things are more fluid and mobile than they've ever been. And you are, yes, in a Power 4 conference, but among the Power 4 conferences, you are not in the top 2 toughest in college football. So you have a winnable path in an expanded college football playoff format that may continue to expand, by the way. There, at some point, the rubber has to meet the road for me with Coach Prime, and that means playing for a conference title in a conference title game, having the runway lights on the way it was last year before Devin Neal ran their CFP hopes into the ground with that game against Kansas. They've got to cross that threshold for me, and it's why I said at the start of the season they should go with Kaidon Salter if that's who they felt like was ready. Clearly, that has manifested itself differently, but I think Ryan Staub is that answer right now.
Yeah, and you brought up the coaching salaries. I mean, Dabo Sweeney money, Kirby Smart money, like he's up there with those guys, like the best in the business.
Who have pelts on the wall.
Yeah, they're competing for championships, and CU's competing for a win over Houston in week 3.
As a touchdown underdog. So you're right. There's no time for going even 6 wins. And the goal is, hey, let's get Peggy to a bowl game, 6 wins. When you're getting paid $10 million a year as a coach, you need to be winning more than 6 games a year. And I get it. You lost the 2 of the best players in the country last year, but the transfer portal king, you should be able to retool a little bit. There is no time anymore with the way the college football landscape is, in my opinion. There is no more accepted down years.
No.
The best programs and the programs that are paying out what the Buffs are paying to their head coach and that are competing with the aspirations that I think the Buffs should have going into year 3 of this Coach Prime era, they find ways to reload. Ohio State had 14 players drafted into the NFL last year out of their starting 22. And guess what? They're still one of the top teams in the country. Texas and Alabama and LSU, all of those schools, Clemson, Notre Dame, you can go down the list as far as you want. They routinely have their rosters completely diminished by NFL draftees and high-profile transfers to other major programs, and they have to find a way to reload. And you can say it's unfair to put the Buffs to that expectation, but they themselves have thrust into that situation, and I think it's a good thing, but you got to follow up on it on the back end.
Yeah, you got to follow up, and again, people say, oh, he's signed through 2029, there's plenty of time, but
Is there,
if he was still making $5 million, $6 million bucks a year, okay, but just like you said, CU did this to themselves. They thrust themselves into this position by forking over a lot of money.
More than you and I will ever see. That's
More
for sure.
than you and I will ever see. And it was just interesting. And I want to go back to the transfer portal thing, and not having a down year. And I think that's why they brought in Kaidon Salter.
Correct.
Was to hopefully not have this down year. But I think the issue with Salter so far has been Pat Shurmur's running the Shador offense.
Right.
He's not running a Kaidon Salter offense. And then in turn, that's impacted his play. That could impact the Buffs winning down the stretch. So there was a lot of question marks with CU going into this season, and we're 2.5 weeks in, and I think do we have even more question marks than we did at the start of the season?
You could make an argument that we know less about the Buffs post-Delaware game than we did going into that game because of the uncertainty that an emergent performance like we saw from Ryan Staub throws into the mix, because he was such a complete afterthought. And there can be some revisionist history from Prime and the staff and the media, frankly, up there in Boulder about all that. But this man was not being mentioned as a horse in even remotely the 2025 quarterback race. And now he's the front runner. And I think it's deservedly so. And I think that he is maybe unfairly set up better to succeed because of some of the points that you laid out. But it doesn't all fall on Pat Shurmur, as easy as he is to blame with practicing incompletions and treating the regular season like the preseason in college. But Kaidon Salter had opportunities specifically against Georgia Tech to make plays with his legs and maximize the athleticism, which is his superpower compared to the other two in that room, and he didn't. And Kaidon Salter was playing against Georgia Tech, playing under the brightest lights he'd ever played in his career as well. So we talk about Julian Lewis not being overall ready for the moment as a 17-year-old kid and maybe not being the most set up to succeed from a play calling standpoint or a personnel standpoint. Kaidon Salter has a little bit of that, but look at what Ryan Staub did to take advantage of the opportunity that he was ready for. And so there is a little bit of certain onus on the player as well. All of that to say, Trent, when you're looking ahead to this game against Houston in the Lone Star State that we are just a handful of days away from, are we going to be coming in on Monday morning talking about a Buffs team that has established clarity and identity offensively and has maybe reestablished its roots defensively? Or are we still feeling like we're going to be walking away with this level of murkiness that is carried through the first 2 weeks of the season?
I think it's going to be murkiness. I just don't have any confidence in this coaching staff to answer all these questions right now. And like we've been saying, Houston is a very formidable opponent. You're playing on the road. You're playing on a short week. I would not be surprised if CU gets off to a fairly slow start on Friday night. So I do think that they can win this game. This is a very winnable game. And that goes back to comparing to Kirby Smart, comparing to Dabo Swinney. If you're getting paid this money, you got to beat Houston. Like, you're getting paid $10 million to go win. You got to go take care of these easier games in conference play. So I think that CU is going to lose. I think this will be low score, and I'll call it 24-20 Houston. But I think that we're going to walk in here on Monday and still have a lot of questions to be answered about this Buffs team.
Well, hopefully we will have some more of those questions answered and hammered out leading into this game at the end of the week. And one thing is for sure, regardless of the outcome, the likes of Trent Finnegan and Jake Shapiro and Will Peterson and James Marilat and everybody at DenverSports.com will have all the information up to the minute that you will need leading into the game, reaction after the game, and the plethora of content available for you on our website at DenverSports.com and across all of our social media channels at Denver Sports 1043 The Fan. So like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on our socials at DEN Sports 1043, and gain access to all of the amazing video content from our radio shows to digital shows like this one on The Rundown and all the writing that Trent and others put out every single week. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you at noon for tomorrow's Rundown.
I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in the work.